Hello, and welcome to the Mothers of All Crime. This is a podcast where we deep dive into mothers involved in infamous crimes and scandals. I'm Monica, and this is Crystal.
Welcome back to the Mothers of All Crime. I'm here today with my good friend Crystal.
Hello.
Hi, long time no talk.
I know. So we have a Canadian case for today.
International.
Yes. And this actually was a request from a viewer. She is a family member of the deceased and thought we might be interested in it. Our listeners might be interested. And again, this is a more recent one, which we don't always get. So we're very excited for a request. And our request
Yeah.
today is going to be Kathy Prosje. It is either Prosje or Pro-G. We aren't entirely sure. So if we're pronouncing her name wrong, I do apologize. We did find a Facebook post from one of her high school friends in relation to the investigation, and they put in there, we
Mhm.
pronounced it as Pro J and Pro G in school. So whichever one of those is right, I apologize in advance if we pick the wrong one.
Yes. So it's two sisters, right?
Yes.
Kathy and Carolyn Prose.
We'll go
But
with
I
Pro
mean,
J.
Kathy and
I like
Carolyn are pretty easy.
it.
Yeah, Proj for sure works. I think
Yeah.
that works.
So they were sisters, grew up pretty standard from what we're able to see. I will preface that this case does not have a ton of information that is public, because the investigation is still
Mhm.
active. Um, and it's up
Right.
in Smithville, which is the Niagara Regional Police Service jurisdiction up in Canada.
Mhm.
And Kathy was found to be deceased. And originally, they didn't release who it was, right? So the
Yeah.
officers arrived at the home, found her body on April 26th of 2024, and originally never published the name because they told the press that there was no investigative need to do so. However, through
Mhm.
conversations with the family, they did give permission, and then that is when the police made the name of Kathy public. And Kathy was 62 years old at the time of her death, and her death was determined
Mhm.
to become a murder investigation.
Yes, it was. I think it was a few days later after her body had been found that they started asking the public for information, still without releasing the name. But they were just at that point saying that this was not a random act of violence, which I think is what initially was thought of, that
Mm-hmm.
it was just a random murdering. But then within a few days, I think that they were looking closer to the victim and closer to the people in her inner circle. And at that point, the police were asking for her information, and they finally did release the victim's name and released a lot of information about her computer and other things that were missing from the home. They were trying to get pawn shops and things like that to come forward if they happen to have these stolen items, because I mean, for a pawn shop, I would think that you wouldn't know necessarily that you were accepting stolen goods. If someone comes in with a computer, you're going to think it's theirs and maybe not even want to ask how they got it. I'm sure there's all kinds of shady situations, but I mean, it makes sense that
Yeah.
that's
I'm sure they
investigative.
have like
a-
their way of asking so if they care. I should put that in there. If they care if it's hot or
Right.
not. I'm sure there's certain questions that they ask. Um, but there are also I think if you are in that world, you know which pawn shops are more likely to take something that might be hot versus the other ones. Because if
Right.
they are found with possession of stolen property, those shops get in trouble too. So I
Yeah.
think there's probably an unspoken list if you are local. And I think all of us know if you have pawn shops in your town, which one's a little bit sketchier than the other. like
Hmm.
so but yeah, they became very interested in this laptop pretty early on, which was interesting to me because it's not necessarily something that would have triggered, to my guess, this much, right? So they were very
Hmm.
specific about this laptop. They had the
Yeah.
exact Hewlett Packard EliteBook 840 G9 notebook silver. Like they had the serial number, they had photos, they wanted this laptop very early on. They made a public release in August of 24 with all of the specs for it versus,
Right.
hey, do you know someone who had a laptop? Like it'd be interesting on what triggered them to figure out why that was so important.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that they thought there would be crucial information on there, and they were trying to suss it out any way that they could. And it's tough if the actual evidence has been sold or hidden.
Yeah. So obviously, as this investigation's going, they are asking a lot of information from the public. They're trying to bring things in, and suspicion started to fall upon a 42-year-old Joseph Villeneuve. Also, I apologize.
I
um,
think that's how you say it.
yeah. So interesting age difference there too, don't you think?
Yeah, because they did live together. So it's not like he's a guy that she knows. It's a guy that she lived with.
Yeah.
And 62 and 42, big age gap.
Listen, to each his own. Um,
For sure, for
however,
sure.
that's significant. Uh, and when you're looking at relationships of that difference, it's kind of weird, right? So when you're 20 dating a 40-year-old, it doesn't seem like a big deal. But as you get older,
Hmm.
that age gap starts to feel and appear larger, right? Because as you age, things come up, and a 42-year-old is able to do a lot more than most mid people in their mid 60s versus someone in their 40s and their 20s probably could get away with doing the same things if you're in shape and all that jazz. Um but in late October, they officially charged him with Kathy's death. And he's also from Smithville, and he was charged with first-degree murder.
He was. He was. I couldn't find a lot of background information about him either. If he had social media, it's not something that I could find.
Yeah, I couldn't
But
either.
yeah.
I will say they never, at least not that I could, I don't know if you found anything, they never formally decide or publicly announced what their relationship was. We know that they lived together and they had some kind of relation in that sense, but there was never a public statement that I could find that was like they were dating, they were in a sexual relationship, were they friends that were living together, or was he just a roommate? Um, I wasn't able to find anything specific.
Yeah, I guess I thought they were dating,
It makes
but
sense,
it
right?
seems like
From contextual
right.
guesses.
Yeah, that's like my best guess. But it seems like they weren't living together alone and that they had another roommate with a hard to pronounce last name, Kathy.
Yeah. So,
That was my interpretation.
yeah, it's a weird dynamic. Um, but as they continue looking into this, Kathy's sister, Carolyn, who was 55, also started coming into the spotlight of this investigation. And it didn't seem to be public on why all of a sudden they started looking at Carolyn. I'm wondering if there was some kind of evidence that eventually came out, or if he said something and that's where that came from to started bringing her sister in. I don't think it's abnormal to look at family like we've talked about before. When it's a husband and wife and the wife ends up dead, the first person they look at is the husband. But not many cases, if a sibling ends up dead, do they start looking at siblings without cause, at least that I've noticed. So it was interesting that that shifted over to her sister, and her sister is a closer age to the other accomplice, I guess is a word I could use at this point.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, it seems like Kathy has been accused of being an accomplice after the fact. And I feel like the only way that investigators would have known that is if Joseph had said something, because he was arrested in October and then Carolyn was not arrested until January. So that's a couple of months for him to sit awaiting trial without bail in jail, talking to detectives, and then all of a sudden Carolyn is being charged. So it makes you think, did she just help him get away with it or attempt to help him get away with it? If so, did a terrible job.
Right.
But like, I mean, this woman was dead for a day and it was a homicide investigation. So it wasn't a good cover up for sure. But so that also is a little confusing to me, like how you could be charged with accessory after the fact if there really was not a prolonged period of, I mean, unless she was helping him evade the police for a few
So
months.
it could be a number of things would be my guess. I'm wondering if she wasn't, my guess, my theory, I suppose, is she wasn't present for the actual act, murder, homicide category of your choosing. But I think
Mhm.
after it was done, Joseph probably called her. She became aware of it and A,
Right.
did nothing. B, probably gave him some advice. Maybe he went over to her house. She took the murder weapon and disposed of it. There could be a number of things. She
Right.
picked him up and drove away with him. Um, there could be a number of things that could have happened. Again, none of these details are public. Um,
Right.
but what I did find is during that time, the interim, right? Joseph was being held. He had a bail hearing in October 2024. I can't find if he actually was let out on bail, but he had the hearing. And then a couple months later is when she got arrested. So
Right.
I wonder if there is some kind of conversation. Maybe her sister is more involved than just after the fact, and they have not charged all of the charges they are planning to charge yet. Um, because again,
That's
we don't
possible.
have active court information yet. This happened a couple months ago, and as much as I wish the court system moved swiftly, that is not the case, even in Canada. So a lot of what we're doing is speculation here.
Yeah. I mean, we love to speculate on here, but I do think that it says a lot that Carolyn has not been charged with, like, I don't know, evading, like, she hasn't been charged with misleading the police, providing lies. Like, it's not that. It's accessory after the fact, which makes me feel like she was quite involved, and that maybe there's even things on this computer, if it has been located, implicating Carolyn, and maybe this was a plan the whole time. And then you're right, she may be charged with additional things.
Yeah, because
I think either way, they're going to do a lot of jail time.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I don't know the Canadian legal system very well, but I referring to the United States, if they aren't fully prepared to try a certain charge, they're not going to put it out there yet. Because that things like in the United
Right.
States, double jeopardy exist, and you would so much rather, if it's within limitations, do it later than before.
Right.
Because
Sure. I mean, they don't want to mess it up on the front end.
right, and then
which
next
makes
thing you know,
sense.
she's walking away scot-free, and she was the one who did it. But
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little odd that these three adults were living together in the first place. It's a little odd. Their relationships to each other are unclear to me. Their age differences are strange. There's a lot of unknowns. I'm hoping there's going to be kind of a public trial, at least of Joseph, just so we can get more information.
Well, I think having two older siblings, if you guys are close and single, I don't think that's super weird living together. Particularly if you
Oh yeah, I don't think it's
find
weird for the sisters. I think
yeah.
it's weird for Joseph.
Yeah, that's the addition, which makes me believe there's some kind of relationship with one of them, if not both of them.
Right.
Because unfortunately, we have seen on numerous occasions where men are very sneaky if they want to be, and some of them are quite impressive on their ability to convince people they're the crazy ones. So, like, for example, if he was having a relationship with both of them, but was able to somehow keep them believing that it's in their head, like, I wasn't flirting with her. Don't be ridiculous. That's your sister. Like, you're acting crazy.
Right.
And telling that to both of them and getting them both to believe it, it wouldn't surprise me because again, it's impressive what some people are capable of. But
yeah,
if you're, I don't know. I don't have any siblings, so it's hard for me to like not imagine myself like walking over to my sister and being like, so are you sleeping with him? Yes or no? Like, just tell me. Like, and just believing this man?
right.
Like, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, it could be that just Kathy and Joseph were involved with each other, and that perhaps there was a financial motivation, which I do have siblings. I can't imagine a point of me killing them for money.
right.
But if you are maybe the beneficiary of her life insurance or a beneficiary of her retirement or something like that, if she was to have a unfortunate accident and pass away. I mean, Carolyn had just retired. I found her obituary, and a lot of people are talking about how it's very unfair that she had just so recently retired and was not able to do all of her plans and enjoy her life after working so hard for so long. Makes me think that there was probably some money, and maybe Joseph and Kathy felt entitled to that money and thought that they could get their hands on it if they eliminated Carolyn. Which, of course, is just a theory, but I mean, money and sex are big motivators in cases of murder often. So those are the things that I think about. Like, is there some sort of weird relationship dynamic? Is there a financial motivation? Has there been a long-term, family issues, unrest, jealousy, tension in the home? We're not going to know at this point, but I'll sure speculate all day long.
Yeah. Well, here's some of my reasonings for speculating on the relationship, domestic violence, DV situations. On Facebook, the Women and Children Shelter of Briar, again, I apologize. They actually made a post in January for Kathy. And they hashtagged it "End Violence Against Women," and that is a women and children shelter for emergencies and support services for abused women and children. And
Yeah.
it's interesting that the majority of their posts are supports, fundraisers, who they are, how they can help people, how you can contact them, their staff, very positive things, events, resources. And then this post of, it feels sad. It's very simple. It has 2 shares, sad, but I can't totally make out what some of the hashtags are, but the major one is hashtag "we count femicide because." I'm not totally sure what that means. But I
Well, I guess no
interpret it
matter how you
as,
split this, though, it's domestic violence.
yeah. And I'm wondering if Kathy had a connection with this shelter, and it could maybe be staff. I don't know, but you would think there would be more of a tribute if it was a staff member, than someone that maybe sought shelter there. So that was one connection that I thought was interesting, that nothing had really been talked about on any of the other articles I saw. And it was a very quiet post. There wasn't a bunch on it. No pictures, nothing. Just her name, the hashtag, her age, where she's from.
It is interesting because femicide it's kind of like a hate crime where you're killing a woman or a girl just because they are a woman or a girl. Like that's like
Right.
the general definition of femicide, and it is usually something that's done by intimate partners or fathers. That, like, those are the most common perpetrators of
Mm,
femicide. So I mean, it kind of implies that perhaps Joseph was an intimate partner, but I think even if he wasn't and he was just basically a family member that she had a close relationship with, it may or may not meet the definition of femicide.
right.
But I mean, it's nice to shout her out, and I do feel terrible that this somehow isn't a bigger deal. I feel like sometimes when murders and crimes are so tightly within a family and the people involved are arrested within a quick period of time, there really isn't a ton of media attention because this is kind of like an inner circle problem. Sometimes things come out in court. If people were making really public appeals, it would have maybe been different, but it was mostly just the police asking for information. And it kind of makes sense because you would think that Carolyn's sister would be someone who would be out there looking for information, trying to solve this, trying to get all the resources, but she's been arrested in connection with it, so I could see why she probably wasn't doing that.
Right, exactly. And it's hard when you don't have other, like, a large social group too. And when you're older, you're probably losing your parents and things like that, which is really sad. But those
Mhm.
are also people that typically advocate
Right.
for investigations and publicity. Um, I will say they're Niagara's still accepting tips. You can call in anonymously. They're still gathering information, it appears, as of January. And I'm sure if there is
Mhm.
vital information that anybody who may be listening has, they would be more than happy to take it, and add it to what they have already compiled. Um, I absolutely will keep an eye on the case. If anything public comes out about the court case. As of January 25, we only have that the investigation is being continued, and homicide detectives are working diligently on the case. But again, right now it's Carolyn and, oh, Joseph. Excuse me.
Jo-
Yeah.
Joseph.
I was like, I
A
had
real
a J.
evil guy name. Yeah. And we'll put information for contacting Niagara Police in the description for this episode. So if you happen to have information about any of these characters that are involved or about the situation, about the computer, if you have knowledge, if you've been to Niagara, it is okay to reach out even with a hunch, a suspicion, something that you think maybe isn't that important. You can still reach out because they are looking actively for information for the trials.
Absolutely.
So that will be in the description of the episode.
Yeah, 100%. So unfortunately, this one, I agree with you. It's really sad that there's not more out there for them because nobody deserves to have their life cut short. And the reality is, like, in a lot of situations, once you retire is really when you start to get to live your life, right? And you're
Yeah.
starting to be able to have the
Yeah.
time and the ability to do what you want to do rather than the grind. And 65 is not old. 65, you are still out doing stuff like traveling, restaurants,
Yeah.
friends. Like, it's not like she was 90. Not that it makes it okay, but like she still had
No,
a
but
lot of life left and the time to finally do it.
It is depressing to think about saving your whole life and, allocating money for retirement and being a productive member of society, and then just having something within your own family like this just completely tragically cut that short. It is devastating to think about.
Yeah.
And I feel like in some cases of femicide, for example, when someone doesn't have children, doesn't have maybe like the white picket fence family, they're just not, they don't garner as much media attention, and that to me is sad.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I hope that Carolyn is at least able to get justice.
Yep. So Carolyn is being held.
You're right. Kathy is able to get justice.
That's okay.
Carolyn is able to get a lot of time.
Very similar names. Yeah. So both the cases are going to be tried at the Robert S.K. Welch Courthouse in the city of St. Catharines, which is unfortunate because St. Catharines is beautiful. But I will keep an eye on that case as it starts becoming a little bit more public. As of right now, again, we don't have any public information about the case. Carolyn's bail hearing was set for the end of January, which means I am assuming that they're still processing and getting everything in order. But again, if you have anything, again, we will list both the detectives' phone number, the anonymous tip line for Crime Stoppers of Niagara in the description.
Yes. So I'm looking forward to updates, and I think that's all we have for today. So until next week, we pick up with our next mother.
Until next week.
Bye.